Series, Supersized to Applied Neuroscience, hosted by Tracy Mickelson, Food Safety Manager, McDonald's Corporation, and me, Tara Pastor Camerata, President and CEO of Pastor Training Inc. We are so excited to have Amanda Ferris here with us. So we want to first find out who is here. Let's find out who's in the audience. If you could put in chat, please put in chat who you are and what agency or what company you're working with. Let's get this chat working. Get something exciting going here. All right, welcome to AFDO's Mindfulness Series, Supersized Applied Neuroscience. All right. So glad that you're with us. If you would, start putting in chat who you are. Hi, Darby. It's been forever. Glad you're here. That's fantastic. All right, who's out there? New York is in the house. Hi, Sean. Oh, Sean, how are you? Michigan. Yay. Hi, Tim. South Carolina. Whoop, whoop. Elizabeth, Tulsa, Oklahoma. All right. Stephanie, Oregon. Woohoo. Noreen from Dallas. Hey, Jennifer. Colorado's represented. Hey, Lindsay. Hi, Ellen. Oh, my goodness. This is awesome. This is like a reunion. Hey, Maggie, how are you? Carrie, Utah, whoop, whoop. Jeannie, it's been forever. Glad you're with us. Hey, Misty from Rock Island County. Oh, my goodness, you guys are awesome. Phoenix is in the house. Hi, Allie. Columbus, Missouri, whoop, whoop. Oh, my God, I love this. The whole country's being represented. This is a great organization, AFDO. I hope you're all going to join our conference coming up real soon. We have such an exciting event planned for all of you today. We have Amanda, who is going to impact your world. We have resources, lots of exciting things. Okay, if you've just joined us, let us know who's in the audience. Let us know who's out there. Obviously, you have Tracy Mickelson from McDonald's Corporation. She's the food safety manager. Whoop, whoop. Hey, Tracy, want to say a few words?
Great to have you all here today, and we're going to have an exciting webinar with Miss Amanda. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Perfect. All right. Fantastic. All right, we have Mobile, Alabama. Brad, welcome. Glad you're here. Anitra, perfect. Philadelphia is in the house. Wonderful. Who else is out there? We'll get started in about a minute. We're going to start off with some polling questions. All right, Minnesota's in the house. Perfect. Okay, the time now is 2:01 p.m. on the East Coast. So we're going to kick off on our exciting adventure today. So Tracy, let's do some polling questions.
All right. I believe we populated the first poll question. So if you can go to your
Sure, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Who are you? We have 67% regulatory, 12% industry, 6% academia, 10% professional association, and 6% top secret. Dun, 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 dun. All right, next question. Let's get to know everyone. Survey said, how many years of experience do you have? Please fill out the poll. On your mark, get set, go. I'll give you another 20 seconds. This is an easy question. Okay, closing the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Most everyone here is 20 plus years of experience. Woohoo! All right. 10 to 20 years of experience, 19%. 3 to 9 years of experience, 31%. And welcome to the folks that have just joined our industry, 10%. Fantastic. You're in the right place where you need to be. We welcome everyone. All right. Another poll, please. Where do you call home? I love this question. You know, it's usually a battle between the Midwest and the Southeast, but let's see who's going to win today. All right, who's represented? We know New York. Darby was the first one on the call today. Excellent. So here we go. Closing out the poll in 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2. Jackpot. Midwest wins again. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. And do we have one more poll? Ms. Tracy? Yes.
Yep, one more.
Have you taken a mental wellness survey during the pandemic? I've used the Neuralink Q app presented during the last webinar. I've completed a survey through work or school. I've completed a survey I found on the internet, social media. I've completed a survey provided by my therapist, doctor, medical provider. I have not completed any such survey. All right, let's find out where we are for our mental wellness survey. We do 2 more seconds, and I have not completed any survey. That is 69% of you. Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing that information with us. And we see 2% use the Neuralink. Okay, when we talk about rules of engagement, absolutely use the chat box to ask or answer any questions, provide your opinions, insights, use your emojis, raise your hand, shout it out, how you feeling about things. This is gonna be very fluid. We're gonna keep everything moving, keep everything engaged. Let's have some fun. Feel free to participate in the discussion. We're all here to learn from each other. So Tracy, you wanna introduce Amanda?
I sure do. So we just want to remind everybody, we have Tara and Tracy here. So we're kind of running the show in terms of hosting and moving things along, Q&A. We got Amy. You don't see her, but she is our wizard behind the curtain. So she's our tech guru. And we're excited to have Amanda return for her second webinar to provide us with some awesome information. So a little bit about Amanda. Amanda Ferris is a Minnesota-based author, business consultant, and host of the Goal Next Door podcast. Always keen to create impact, her early start in the childcare and hospitality industries led to over 20 years in operations management and corporate training. Amanda advises executive leadership teams and entrepreneurs everywhere from startup organizations to publicly traded companies around the world, while serving as the managing director for Clover & Kind, which is a company laser focused on helping people create real, authentic connections in their workplace, communities, and homes. Amanda is also an operating partner for AmeriCorps, a digital healthcare consultancy which specializes in med tech devices and mental health services. Amanda has routinely led commercial initiatives in marketing, operations, and supported companies focused on innovation, research, and development. She enjoys helping aspiring authors and thought leaders to get their much needed insights out of their head and into the real world. I could use some help with that. Amanda is known for her quick-witted humor, creativity, and passion to drive results. Splitting her time between Australia, the UK, and the US, Amanda's dedication to lifelong learning and the pay it forward philosophy leaves traces. As an alumnus of the program, Amanda volunteers for Best Prep, a Minnesota-based organization that helps high school students prepare for their future careers in entrepreneurship. When she isn't working, you can find Amanda soaking up the outdoors. Of course, she's from Minnesota, and taking on new adventures around the globe, always with a good cup of coffee in hand. So we're very, very excited to have her back. And then real quick, how we're going to be set up today is Amanda is going to talk quite a bit about mental health and performance. And so how your your health and awareness can affect your performance. So she's going to do a first segment on some information. We're going to stop for a 5 to 10 minute Q&A. So go ahead and use the chat to enter any questions. We may even, if we've got something that's really like burning question, we may interrupt her and pop that out then. And then she'll complete it with some additional information around tools and resources and how you can kind of use some of the stuff we talked about on the last webinar. We'll do a final Q&A and a wrap up. So again, use the chat, make comments, ask questions. We want this to be a dialogue and a discussion and interactive because she's just got a lot of great information for us. So
Hey,
definitely want to
Tracy?
make this as helpful as possible. Yep.
Tracy, so in between the two topics, I believe we're going to have some polling to
And we
add some
will.
excitement and some flair. Does that work?
That works.
Okay,
All right.
fantastic. All right, let's give it up for Amanda.
All right. So Amy, if you wouldn't mind popping up those poll questions, and Amanda can kind of talk through some of the questions that she's got here, which will kind of lead into what she's going to be discussing today.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Tracy, Tara, and Amy, and for all of our participants today. I just love these ladies and their warm energy. Isn't it great? This is like, if we ever need a new host for The Price is Right or any like mainstream game show, I'm nominating you as a team because you're very well organized and fun. So thank you so much for having me back. So as we're going through these poll questions, if we were in person, we could easily ask for a show of hands, which would be really fun so we could get a visual representation of where everybody in the group is. And I think it's healthy to exercise some awareness about comparison of like where we are. It relates to how we perceive our world and other workplaces and our own, and where we can start to change the dials on that if we'd like. So just starting off here as a warm up here, if you can make an educated guess, what percentage of people within your company or organization do you believe are struggling with some form of mental health issue above and beyond normal levels of stress? This could be work related or otherwise. I'm just going to zip through these so you can answer them at your speed. How many people do you know personally, and again, this can be work or personal life, who are currently or have previously dealt with a mental health issue? Some different options there for you. If you were to make an educated guess, what do you think your company or your organization's financial loss is per year due to mental health issues impacting the workforce? And I realize this is a lot of guessing, and that's okay. It's just going to be our perception based, so you can make educated guesses. Based on your experience, how much impact do you think mental well-being has on the productivity of top performers? This could be in your organization. This could be more broadly, however you want to take that. And finally,
Amanda, excuse me, just so you know, those last two questions you asked, the answers will need to be put in chat.
Oh, okay, great. And fill up that chat. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Moving forward, any other questions in chat?
Awesome. Awesome. And if you were to give your company or your organization a letter grade on how well it supports the well-being of its workforce since the beginning of this year, so just January 2021 and beyond, would you give it an A, a B, C, D, or an F?
All right. And just to let everybody know, you have the next few minutes to complete that, and we'll go through the results during the Q&A in between her two segments. So thanks, Amanda. All right. We're ready to be educated.
Excellent. All right. So I just want to take a quick second, since we're talking about mental well-being and performance and in the workplace. I imagine a lot of you might be working remotely or in the field right now, and we can be multitasking, which is, I'm totally fine with that. If I just want to honor you for being here on the call, whether it is live or the recorded version. But just take a moment to check where your body is at, having that awareness, like where's your posture and how's your breathing? Are you open and able to receive? And if you're driving, I want you to be safe as you're doing kind of this self-analysis. But I think that's really important, having that awareness, especially as we're talking about mental well-being is our breathing shallow? Is it deep? Are we allowing our bodies to be able to take it in? Sometimes I'm kind of a fidgety gal, so I like to, pace back and forth when I'm listening to webinars. Whatever is most beneficial to you and your style of learning or productivity, just get comfortable. And I hope that we can just create an environment. I have a lot of things to go through today, but as I've told the ladies just before we hopped on the live webinar, if there are certain questions or certain directions that we want to take this conversation, I do want to engage you and have it be more of a two-way thing than me just talking at you. I have had a lot of experience professionally, but I still haven't seen it all. I don't know it all, and I don't pretend to. A lot of the things I've learned the hard way and by making some really interesting mistakes. So I am just dedicated to lifelong learning, truly, and I want to hear your feedback. What's working for you out in the field, in your role, in your industry, and not just in work. What's happening for you in life? What's working for you? So there's going to be a couple of calls to action here and there, but I just want to throw that out there before we begin. Just take good care of yourself as you're sitting here. Otherwise, you're going to be walking out of this webinar looking like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, like all hunched over. That's me anyway. So, watch your posture, allow yourself to be comfortable and set yourself up physiologically for a really great experience. So
Amanda, real
Yeah,
quick. So someone already had a question. I think it's good to maybe start with this because it'll kind of set the stage. So question is, can you define the mental health issue that we're focusing on this discussion? And they gave two examples, like clinically diagnosed or just stress-based or both. So kind of what's our focus here for our discussion?
I think that is a terrific question to kick things off. I am not a clinical psychologist. I have done a lot of study on neuroscience and as it applies to executive coaching. But if you are having questions about particular symptoms that you're experiencing when it comes to depression, anxiety, anything that's beyond just the regular stresses of life, I highly recommend, and we'll talk about some of those mental health resources that get you in touch with a clinical professional at the end. But in the meantime, what we're really going to focus on is just kind of an overview of what's happening in the world of mental health as it relates to the workplace. So we'll talk about depression, we'll talk about statistics. Last webinar, we talked about stress, good and bad, eustress, how that helps us grow and be challenged, and that can be good for our development. And we talked about bad stress and how that can kind of teeter off into a danger zone for trauma and the depression, anxiety, things that create pressure on us mentally that impact our performance. So I hope this answers your question. We're really going to focus on how we can start to make those adjustments in performance as it relates to that stress, that pressure that's happening, so we can feel better as we're working. So when you feel good, you work good. And that's probably not proper English, but bear with me. And when we get into more of the psychologically safe environment in a workplace and your team kind of environment, we'll provide some resources, but we'll mostly be focusing on, what are the tactical things that you can apply today in your workplace, on the job, in your life. What are some things you can do? A lot of this, you're probably already going to know some of these things, but they're just going to be helpful reminders. We'll sprinkle in some statistics so you can see where the relevancy is today in the world that we're living in. And if there are additional questions, if we don't have the answers, we can certainly provide those additional resources on who to ask in follow-up over email in the coming weeks, and in other resources on the website, for example. So there are no questions that are off limits. I just want to make sure that that's very clear, but I might not have all the answers, so I might need to get back to you. But I hope that answers the initial question. Fabulous. All right. Well, with all that being said, let's go ahead and dive right in. So a few weeks ago, my mom decided to invite herself up to Minnesota. She has recently retired from over 35 years in daycare, and she was amazing at her job. I mean, extraordinary. She won several awards, and she definitely deserved that retirement. I don't know how many diapers she changed in her career, but I don't want to know. It's just amazing. But she went to Florida. She came back for Mother's Day and stayed a few weeks. So I was grateful to have that opportunity to spend some time with her as life kind of gets back on track, and we went out to eat for the first time. I hadn't been out to eat in a restaurant for months, and maybe even longer now that I think about it. But it was just kind of a weird experience reacclimating into society, and just wanted to take the moment to sit down and talk with my mom and see how she's doing with this adjustment into retirement, especially with everything that was happening in the world. And I was just really pleased because my mom is one of my heroes. I just have to say this. I know I haven't always been the most easy child for her, but she's always encouraged me, and she's just been amazing. She just has this huge heart of gold. And that's really evident in when she was a daycare provider, in that she wanted to make sure that every child and every family felt really valued and important. And even though she's retired, she makes sure that every time she comes back to Minnesota, that she actually revisits those former client families and spend some time with them one-on-one. Now, even with the pandemic, she still made sure to make those visits happen in a socially distanced sort of way. But as I was sitting down for dinner with her and asking her about what like the highlights of her trip were, she was talking about this one family that she had visited that day and what that experience was like. So they met in the driveway, and it's just kind of weird. You know, I have to say, I'm not really quite used to the socially distanced thing. I usually just kind of stay put at home and, you know, interact with people through the internet, which is great. But being out in public and around other people, it's just an interesting kind of social experiment. So I'm noticing my own thoughts as I'm telling the story. I'm like, oh, that felt really weird. And it's a little odd. Anybody else feel a little weird right now as this like life is kind of going back to normal, but we're not quite out of the woods? But anyway, so she was telling me about this experience. She met her client family in the driveway of their home, and she was so pleased to see the kids. And, you know, the conversation was going along. They were talking about how big the kids had grown. It'd been a while since they'd seen each other. And the conversation went from feeling really good, warm, fuzzy feelings of revisiting each other, and kind of took a turn for the worse when the father started to talk about his work experience and what the pandemic has caused as an effect in his life. And what you would normally expect, you know, maybe there were some work challenges, because that's most people I know have been dealing with challenges in their business or in their workplace, especially in the hospitality and the tourism industries, frontline workers, a lot of pressure, a lot of challenges. But his story was on the opposite end of the spectrum, where he was sharing how much the pandemic had benefited his business and how he was busier than ever. And he just started going on and on, detailing all of the benefits of all the money he's making because of hazard pay and overtime and stimulus checks and other unexpected bonuses for the work he was doing. And he leaned back onto his shiny new BMW and patted it and said, "Thanks, COVID." So when my mom was telling me this story in the middle of this restaurant that I'm watching these servers run their butt off, you know, it's already a hard job, but they are short staffed. There are people who are struggling. I look around the restaurant and there are people who probably know somebody they've lost somebody dear to them due to COVID or some other complication, people struggling with mental health issues. And we have this person who I am sure he meant well, and he was truly grateful for all of these wonderful blessings in his life. He was probably excited for his family that his lifestyle was able to upgrade because he could now afford it. But the thing that challenged me most in that story was his lack of awareness in what most people were experiencing around him. And it was that was the lasting impression, that uneasy, icky feeling, rather than the gratitude. So I want to acknowledge anybody here who feels really comfortable with where they are at right now in their personal, their professional, or their thought life. So if you're fully satisfied with your performance and your mental well-being, that's amazing. And I want to honor that. That speaks to a resilience that you've worked for over the course of your career or your lifetime. And I want to call you out, not just to simply honor your journey, but to provide you with the challenge, everyone say challenge, of awareness, so that when you're in those situations, when you're around other people who might not be feeling on top of the world when it comes to their performance, their personal, their thought life, professionally, you can become aware of those who are silently struggling around you. So when things are going well, we tend to forget what it was like to be weighted down by worry, especially in times like these, because once we're kind of out of the woods, it's like, oh, what a relief. And that's what we're focusing on is, okay, I can go back to doing what I want to do. But this can create an enormous blind spot, which alienates those around you. And that disconnect on a team translates to added anxiety, likelihood of mistakes on the job, misunderstandings, and even employee turnover. So whether you are someone who is all good, someone who wants to go from being a high achiever to a peak performer, like we talked about in the last webinar, or perhaps you're one person who's desperately trying just to keep their head above water and juggle everything so nobody knows how bad you're actually struggling. My goal is in today's webinar that you can leave with one thing that can either ease that pressure or help to make your work life, your personal life, anything, one tip. That's all I want you to take away today. I think you'll get more than that to make life better for yourself or for your team. And I want you to know that regardless of how you feel today or how yesterday went or how this year is gone, that you're really not alone on an island. And it feels like that at sometimes. Like I said, I've been living mostly in my condo and I see a few people and that's all. I get it. The isolation is crippling sometimes. And there's really no way to bright side that. But you are not alone. And I have to say, it doesn't feel like it, but the challenges that you're facing or that you faced in this last year or over the course of your life, they're actually preparing you for serving, contributing on a higher level, not just contributing on a higher level, but doing so with greater ease. Now, the results are not going to be tangible. They're not going to happen overnight. I can promise you that. But by using some of these tools and tips that we'll talk about today, you will see and feel these positive results in time, and you will thank yourself for persisting in the face of these difficulties. And it's not going to be perfect. If we can accept that and we can start to see that incremental progress and use these tools to gauge where we're at and to see how far we've come, we are going to be more open to contributing on a higher level. Because I can already feel it in my own mind right now. It's like, you want me to do more? I don't want to be asked to do one more thing. My plate is full. I'm not getting sleep. I mean, I love coffee, but I don't love it that much. I don't want to, lose out on all these connections. I'm missing connections with people who are right in front of me because I'm spaced out. I will say this, it is, I wasn't expecting to get emotional. You have come this far and you can trust yourself that even though the rest of the world might be celebrating this next part of coming out of the pandemic, we know that it's not fully over for a lot of the frontline workers and hospitality workers and people who are still dealing with employee shortage or turnover or impossible situations that we're being put in our work and our personal lives. It will get better. And I can't give you a date on when that is, but maybe that day is today, because you can trust yourself that if you've gotten this far and you've been able to learn some things along the way, that not only will you see tomorrow and it will be better, but you'll be able to pass the torch and to be able to provide some hope for the people around you. I know this to be true. And I'm also curious if you know that you have come a long way in life and there's something that's just really like pressing on you right now that it's really helped you, whatever that is, put it in the chat. I want to know what's helping you get through tough times, whether that's personally, professionally, and help share some of this knowledge around. So I want to share some mental health statistics. So some of this you might be aware of and some of it you might not be. So part of those poll questions can help bring that into perspective. But one in five of every adult in the United States experience some sort of mental health issue. That's quite a lot of people when you think of the population, but more than half of those people struggling with those chronic symptoms are going untreated. And they're not going untreated for lack of care, for lack of options or resources. A lot of people, and you might identify with this personally, is that there's still stigma associated with going and getting help. Or if you were to get a therapist or a counselor, it can be seen as there's a problem or you're broken, and you're not broken. But we can use these tools to improve our performance, but somehow it just doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel as cool as hiring an executive coach if we're going to go see a counselor, right? There's still that fear of judgment, whether that's from our colleagues, our friends, our family, or ourselves. Another concern in the workplace that isn't talked about a lot is not using the resources that are provided in a workplace, because there's a concern there will be a lack of career opportunities, because that mental health service sticks with you, and somehow it's going to go on your permanent record, and people are going to look at you differently and not see you as qualified. So I think that's really interesting, and we can revisit that as well. Mental health. Oh, go ahead, please.
So a couple of things, just to give you some insight on what's happening in chat. Got great responses between the gym, blocking out personal time, exercising with their dog, connecting with friends, time with the dog at the dog park, actually cutting back on wine, exercising more. So a lot of great stuff there. And then we also have a follow-up question about the guy with the BMW. What about us that have really had it good, like the BMW guy, who feel guilty? So can you help us with that?
I'm so glad that question came up, because I didn't say it. I got off on a tangent, which happens, so bear with me. So thank you for that question. Okay, having a BMW, having success, having good things, being happy, having good, joyful things happening when other people are suffering, there is nothing wrong with that. That can exist at the same time that these other things are, the challenges in the world are going on. I think it's important to acknowledge that feeling guilt for that is a real thing. And I think it takes courage to be able to admit that as well. But it's also important to put it into perspective that if you're coming from a posture of which is a scientific term, really, that's completely uncalled for in the workplace. Can I get an amen? If you're going at it as, I've been given this success, I'm going to go replicate that. I'm going to go mentor somebody. I'm going to go help my team because now I have the capacity, I have the bandwidth to go do that. Awesome. And you might not choose to do that. I'm not saying you have to give it away or sell it or anything like that. I think it's important. And you're the only, whoever's listening to this, whether it's the person that asked the question or other people or myself even, you're the only person who knows where you're at, where your heart is, where your mind is in those interactions. The reason I bring it up is so that we can have an awareness, not to have the guilt so much as how can I meet this person where they are, even though I might be in a different place in my life in the middle of this circumstance, so that maybe you can call on other challenges that you've had to inform your empathy. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but using that as a tool to connect better with people. So it doesn't seem like there's this, especially if you have a physical, tangible evidence of having a great success, that can be really intimidating for somebody who's like, I have the appearance of success too, but deep inside, I feel like my life is falling apart. So you really can't judge a book by its cover, not to be too cliche, but just want to encourage you to just check where you're at as you're interacting with people and be sensitive to that. But that doesn't take away from, your journey or from theirs. But sometimes those other extra elements, if we're not aware of it, then we can come off as a jerk. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. That was great. We have a lot more comments in chat, from prayer to gardening to church time, about strength and peace. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Exercising, meditation, write down things that you're thankful for. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, that's great. And I hope that we can save the chat too. So, because there's a few that have popped up that I'm like, oh, that's a good one. I want to write that one down. I had to move things around in my office space because I tend to hit things because I talk with my hands. So I'm glad that you're protected. There's no splash zone being virtual like this. But yeah, so coming back to the statistics. So when we're looking at a global scale, about 3 in 10 employees experience severe stress, anxiety, or depression. And mental health conditions are far more common than cancer, diabetes, or heart disease. And this is costly. So depression and stress and anxiety all impact the workplace because obviously performance, what we're going to talk about, productivity, and you think about retention. So addressing the mental health issue, I'm going to say mental health crisis, even before the pandemic, that was a crisis with suicides on the rise. When you're thinking about self-harm, and I just want to say really quickly, as I'm talking through this and I'm listing things, I truly hope that this isn't a trigger for anybody. And as I'm listing it, if my tone comes across as flippant because I'm listing and I'm not, I just want to say, I don't mean to come across as flippant. I want to keep this positive. But as we go through this, I think it's important just to be aware of that. And sometimes I need to check my awareness as well. So feel free to call me out if I'm coming across a certain way, but I want to respect you where you're at. Now, when employees do get help, whether that is in their own time, you can use mobile apps, you are employing meditation or other means to address the stress. 80% of employees treated, they report an improved work efficacy and satisfaction in their job. So that's a direct correlation to the retention. If somebody is happy and healthy and feeling like they're going to be able to get through today, not just the work, but they can just get through today, they're likely to stick around at their job longer. So this also this results in reduced medical costs, the increased productivity, lower absenteeism, and just decreased disability costs. Depression is a leading cause of disability worldwide. So that's not just in the US. And an estimated 6 to 7% of full-time workers in the US experience major clinical level depression. So I'm curious, do you know how much depression costs your organization? If you don't know, there are some great resources online. They have a depression calculator. You can just Google depression calculator and you can see, depending, every size business and organization is different. So I don't want to put out any stats specific to like averages because it ranges so broadly. But if you want to find out what it could be costing your organization, definitely check out the calculator. And that also incorporates not just the stress and anxiety and depression, but also substance abuse. So I think that's important. So the reality is people are using this time coming out of the pandemic to look at this as an opportunity to reflect on what their priorities are, what they value most, and especially how it relates to their choice of work, be it a career position or a gig. So this is causing additional turnover across the board, especially in industries that are already notorious for higher turnover rates like hospitality, tourism. Even in high tech, we are seeing turnovers start to increase because some of these organizations who have been getting a surge in business due to the pandemic are hiring developers left and right. So they're able to double, triple their salaries and pull them away. So everybody is strained. This isn't just in one group. And I realize in a group of this size, whether this is our live participants on the webinar or even in the recording or in the group of AFDO, that there is a high likelihood that there are people on this call right now that have thought about or they're seriously considering changing career paths as a result of these extra pressures. And maybe you're the person who's weighing up, how much longer can I keep trading my time and energy and making these sacrifices for this job? Or maybe you know somebody and they haven't spoken up. They're feeling the struggle of the weight of these ever increasing demands, the job duties that they didn't seem to sign up for years ago, and somehow they're still responsible for that given the circumstances. In between these long hours, the long days that just kind of bleed into weeks and months, maybe it's an inbox on the verge of bankruptcy, or you're fielding these constant crisis management calls. If there's someone on your team that feels that they've sacrificed too much or they've stuck around too long, they can barely pull themselves out of bed in the morning. Maybe they're really exhausted physically, mentally, emotionally. Just take heart. I have to time out myself because I understand that I'm not telling you, this is my disclaimer, I am not telling you to run home and type up your 2 weeks notice if you're feeling this way. A, that would be irresponsible. B, that does not solve any underlying issues. And C, I'd probably be banned for life from AFDO. So what I am saying is that this is the time, it's ripe to evaluate where you're at in life in all of your life domains, including work, but most importantly, in your thoughts and your emotions and in your well-being, because you could quit your job today and start something new tomorrow. But if you still have those same limiting beliefs, those unconscious thought patterns or self-sabotaging habits, and yes, even your natural talents can work against you if they're inflamed, all of that is still going to show up for you just the same, no matter where you go. And while the allure of something new might be enough to satisfy the urge to hurry up and do something, you might just be kicking the can down the road. So when the honeymoon is over, you'll be faced with the same set of challenges, and you'll just be reinforcing that propensity to rinse and repeat that unhealthy cycle again. So I just really want to encourage you, don't quit your job. Some of you might do that eventually, but I want to encourage you to take this time to step back where you are right now, practice this ability, this beautiful ability of metacognition. We talked about that a little bit in the last webinar too. So we can have thoughts, but as humans, we can practice metacognition. That's stepping back from the thoughts and being able to analyze them and see, oh, that's serving me. Oh, this isn't. And I want to release this and change this. So it's an amazing thing, but it can be really overwhelming if you're just feeling like crap, to be honest. So whether you decide to stay in your role or move on, this is still something that's going to affect anybody with thought patterns.
Amanda.
Oh, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. Do you think we should go to the poll questions now and see what the results are?
I would love to. I'm so curious.
Me too.
Okay, I don't think I've ever seen this way before. So this is exciting, learning something new. All right, so the first question, and I should have glasses too, I'm sorry. So
how about I read it? I'll read it. If you were to make an educated guess, what percentage of people within your company or organization do you believe are struggling with some form of mental health issue above and beyond normal levels of stress, work-related or otherwise? So we have the results. Less than 10%. We have 6% of the folks that answered that. 10 to 25%, we have 23%. 25 to 50% is the number one answer at 42%, followed by 50 to 75% at 27%, and then only 3% more than 75%.
Wow. And as we're going through this, I'm curious for our participants, if there's anything that surprises you about these results, put it in the chat, because I mean, this is really interesting since we're dealing with so many different industries and professionals from all walks of life. I mean, astonishing.
Okay, and question number 2, how many people do you know personally, work or personal life, who are currently or have previously dealt with mental health issues? And the number one answer is 1 to 3 at 35%. All right. Okay, question number 3. If you were to make an educated guess, what do you think your company organization's financial loss is per year due to mental health issues impacting the workforce? The number one answer was more than $50,000 is lost annually due to mental health issues affecting those in my company organization, and 35% of the group said that.
And we have about 100 participants right now. I'm not the best at math, but that's a whole lot of commas.
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. Question number 4. Based on your experience, how much impact do you think mental health well-being has on the productivity of top performers? And the number one answer is substantial impact. Issues affect productivity more than half of the time, and 44% of the folks said that. And 17% said severe impact, while 28% said moderate impact. And then question number 5, if you were to give your company organization a letter grade on how well it supports the overall well-being of its workforce since the beginning of this year, it would receive, the number one answer is C, average at 34%, followed by B at 32%.
Wow. I'm curious, for our folks on the panel here, our organizers, Tara, Tracy, and Amy, what surprised you about this poll? Because this is kind of a different one than just like, hey, where are you from? You know, like this is showing it all.
It is very much so. I was really surprised about the financial part of it and what that financial impact for the organizations, because if we were to take AFDO as an association and ask that question association-wide, how many millions of dollars would that actually add up to?
Wow.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. I think it's important that people did understand too on that question about, how much does your health basically and awareness affects your performance. So I think it's important that people understand that it is important and it does affect everything that you're doing in your life. So even if you have, I think to your point, Amanda, minimal impact, or you feel that you think it is minimal impact, it's still impact, because as the one question came up, I feel guilty. Hey, I'm not struggling as much as somebody else. And I've seen that in other situations too. And it seems like all of a sudden everybody's talking about something and it's like, who can provide the worst story or the best story? Like, it's like all of a sudden you're like somewhere in the middle, or you're on the opposite end, and you're like, well, I can't speak up because I don't fit that group, or I don't fit that situation. And again, you start to feel guilty about that if it's, you're positive in a negative conversation, maybe, or a struggling conversation. So yeah.
Wow. And I'm really glad that you said that too, because I think it's interesting, whatever's happening in life, anytime, and especially, I mean, I'm from the Midwest, this happens a lot. You get in those conversations where it's like there's a competition to who's like and the award for biggest victim is, and it's like, yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that we can all have a perspective check, whatever side of the spectrum that we're landing in. And there's going to be other emotions, whether it's the guilt or comparison thinking, especially because of social media, and our use of social media is going up with the circumstances because we're, isolated or alone, or, I'm gonna throw myself under the bus here. When I'm not used to social interactions and I kind of reach my word limit, my business partners would be like, she has a limit. But when I start to get that kind of uneasy, I think I ran out of conversation topics, and then it gets kind of silent, and there's a certain level of, uncomfortable silence that I'm okay with. And then it's like, oh, let me pull out my phone and look busy for a second. It's like, ooh, it's just interesting what happens when we are in the social media, whether it's mindlessly or we're paying attention. We are reinforcing that comparative thinking when we're, swipe, this sort of culture, the selfie society. We're seeing the person in the highlights reel of, wow, look at their car, whatever. That might not be the reality of it. So there's the people who are feeling guilty for having what they have. There's the people who are putting on a show. And then there's the folks, that's overly simplifying it, but there's just so much more than meets the eye. So I think it's a really interesting perspective. And I'm curious what people's takeaways were just from that little exercise as well. But yeah, so I want to talk about improving our performance alongside mental health management, because our minds are full of repetitive thought patterns. We talked about the last time on AFDO webinar, we talked about how about 95% of our thoughts are the same as the day before. And a lot of those are unconscious, and about 80 to 85% are negative on some level. They're not edifying on some level. So this could be obsessive thinking, worry, racing thoughts, or just you have an inability to focus or quiet your mind and kind of slow down and see what's actually going on in your mind to take a moment to analyze, is this serving me, or where did that come from? So I think, again, as we're talking and I'm getting carried away with the conversation here, let's just take a second to think about that. What am I thinking about right now? Maybe I'm thinking about my grocery list, or I'm thinking about where I'd rather be than talking to this crazy Minnesotan girl, talk about mental health issues. So, think about the thoughts that you're having, and it's like, oh, that's really interesting. I just had a thought. It was a self-judgment thought. Okay, thanks, self. Thanks for the thought. Even if it's not serving you, you can still acknowledge it and use that to move forward. Now, it would take a lot of time and energy to analyze, all of the thousands of thoughts that we're having. But when you're noticing that it's impacting how you feel, especially when you're like, oh yeah, I just noticed that I'm like starting to hunch over, or I'm like becoming more closed, and how my posture is, like, I wonder where that's coming from. Is it because I'm just on the computer, or is it because of my thinking? And how is my thinking impacting my physiology? So there's different tools, different ways you can, change your physiology, whether you do the Tony Robbins clapping thing. I'm sorry, I gotta go like this if I'm Tony Robbins, or you can dance for a second, or do those little biohacks or whatever to get the endorphins going, or you can just like sit up and start breathing more deeply, and that can change of state can influence how your thought patterns flow. So I'm curious, before I get into this a little deeper, what are your observations about how mental health impacts the personal or organizational performance? So what observations do you have about mental health and how it impacts performance? So put your thoughts and your comments in the chat, just things that you've noticed in your own experience, things you've witnessed in other people, maybe something you saw on TV. Just love to hear your thoughts. And I won't analyze your thoughts, that's your job. So signs that you might be a high achiever, but you're not yet a peak performer, include imposter syndrome or feeling like a fraud. So an example of that might be that person who's successful next to you and you're like keeping up with the Joneses, but inside you feel like, I'm just not there. I'm, burning the candle at both ends. Like, this is a house of cards, it's gonna fall apart. Maybe you feel like you're stuck, or you're perpetually spinning plates, or you vacillate between perfectionism and procrastination, or maybe difficult people or interactions have a tendency to just kind of set your whole day off. And it happens more often than not. You have a short fuse, whether that's anger, or you can act defensive really easily when someone insinuates, even accidentally, that there are more things for you to do. You might engage in self-deception, and that's kind of a difficult one, I think, to wrap our heads around sometimes. Like, why would I lie to myself? Well, hey, we do it all the time, actually. And anytime we're avoiding certain areas of growth based on a fear of what it might mean, then we're engaging in self-deception. So this list of things that I'm going through doesn't make you a bad person. Speaking of judging, what it might mean, it's just, these are thought patterns that statistically occur in high achieving people. These are the thought patterns that are holding them back from really getting the fulfillment of their job or their passion and all of the things that they love. They might be doing it, but they're not fully present and engaged in living that joy because they're worried that when's the other shoe going to drop, or they're living in the future, they're living in the past. Maybe you keep finding yourself in impossible situations at work and in your personal life on a regular basis, because these are challenges that you have created yourself and you didn't even realize it.
Amanda,
oh, go ahead. Thank you.
So just to give you some feedback from your question that you asked, and this sounds like it's going to where you're going. One comment was, I feel that each individual can bring everything that's going on in their life with them to work, good and bad. Another comment, it's a trickle-down effect that will affect all levels and is terrible for morale. And then next comment is, performance is negatively impacted, employees take more leave.
Those are very insightful. Thank you, for reading those off. I really appreciate it. I think that as you're having these observations occur in real time, taking note of that, not necessarily keeping like a hit list of things that are going well. Also keep a list of things that are going well and acknowledge that in the workplace. These can be the topics of discussion when you talk about mental well-being in the workplace. And you can share it in an anonymous way where you're not putting somebody on the spot or exploiting a situation where somebody, confided in you or anything like that. But these are the types of observations. It can be really healthy practice to step back and observe and without judgment and just say, wow, this is happening. What do I think about that? Where is that coming from? Why might be impacting that? So great feedback. Thank you so much. So other things, okay, I'm even going to say thought patterns that are intense gifts. And I'm going to say that from what I'm seeing so far in our participants, this probably is going to be a lot of people where you have a high capacity to achieve and do great things. So you probably have these thought patterns that are flaring up, and they are the thought patterns that can help you achieve, but they're also the things that when used, when they're overused or underused, they can create sort of this pendulum effect where we create problems. Okay. So this could be obsessive thinking, worry, doubt. Okay, entrepreneurs, fantasizing, intellectualizing, or philosophizing about the past or the future. So it's like, oh, I woke up with this really great idea. This is what we're going to do. And you jump ahead and then you start thinking, and then I can buy that BMW, and then I can do this. And then it's like, you haven't created the thing. We need to use that gift of being able to vividly visualize and then reverse engineer it to create those things in reality. Other patterns of thinking that can be destructive to us is having, this one's a little bit tricky. If we notice that we're having difficulty replicating previous success as we're taking on new levels of responsibility, that is a key indicator that you're probably in the zone of a high achiever and not yet peak performance. If you're playing constant catch up to the point of exhaustion, or you start to avoid social situations or start to burn out, oftentimes high achievers they'll burn out, and it's kind of like a stop, go, push, pull energy, and then they'll just move on to the next thing and not realize that this is the pattern that's sabotaging them.
Amanda, so we only have a few minutes left in this program, and there's a fantastic question that I think should really take us to the next level. How or type of changes can be done to help an organization struggling with low employee morale, lack of communication, and lack of transparency? So we're on our final 6 minutes.
Oh my goodness, where did the time go? Yes, that is a phenomenal question. So the most common ways that a workplace can support mental well-being, besides just having programs, because there's been recent surveys, and I'll make sure you guys get the link for this blog that I read last night. That was amazing. But the most common ways to affect change positively in the workplace when it comes to mental health is to raise awareness, to educate the workforce, to create mentally healthy climate and culture, and to improve access to services and supports. And not just like, hey, we checked the box, we got the services, being able to incorporate that into your day-to-day business. So if you're working in the hospitality industry, who are my hospitality people out there? When you have people coming on for a shift, you're going to coach them into shift, not just, hey, this is the special of the day, and these are the steps of service that we want to highlight, and this is the weather and the sports games that we need to be aware of, and this is what I want you to sell. Have a moment to comfort set in that moment, and it only takes a few seconds. You know, everybody give me one word of where you're at mentally right now. No judgment, just share that. And then we can acknowledge that and hold that space for your team. And then you can ask for help. That can be a great way to open up the conversation. Okay, by the way, we have some great resources. Now, it can be a little dangerous when you're in a workplace setting and you're like, I'm not a psychologist. I do not want this to turn into group therapy. We're not equipped for that, and we still have a job to do. I get you. I feel you. All good. But you can still post resources for your employee assistance program. You can still talk about, because like we go back to the beginning of when we were sharing the stats, the people that are struggling with mental health issues have access most of the time to a service or a support resource. They're not using it more than half of the time. And we need to be able to break down that stigma and not tell people in a condescending way, like, you need help, or this is probably your diagnosis. Just like, hey, I'm here for you. And go back to the times you felt challenged, whether that's in the moment or a previous experience that you had, to ask empathetic questions. And that's not storytelling. That's, you know, how can I best support you in this moment? And then when you coach your people out of position at the end of the shift, how are you doing? And give them a chance to talk about it if they want to. And other people aren't going to want to talk about it. And that's totally fine. But honoring that person as a whole person, that is going to keep them engaged no matter what happens in that restaurant or hotel or whatever organization you're in, because you are feeling seen. And that's what we all want at the end of the day. Am I right? So if we check our attitude of, are we viewing workplace mental well-being as a way to support employees or salvage them, that can be the difference maker, because supporting them is going to feel different for that person than if it's like, well, I just need you to get you through to the next hire or the next holiday, right? So we don't want to treat people like they're just band-aids until the storm is over, right? I hope I answered that.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. And the final 3 minutes.
Oh my goodness. Well, I think this is a really great opportunity because I've just been going on and on and on, and there's so much more to share, but I will make sure that there are some resources for you. I think I want to highlight more of what mental well-being in the workplace can look like, and then we'll provide resources to help create that environment. So you know that it is a mentally or psychologically safe and mentally well workplace when people are taking fewer sick days. The emotional waves are not as high. The peaks and valleys aren't as high and low. People aren't as argumentative. There's a healthy team dynamic, and there's more self-awareness where people are supported to help self-regulate. They're not putting the job on you. That's not your job to regulate somebody's emotions or how they're feeling psychologically, but you can support them. Trigger events don't impact people as much. You'll also notice that people are more self-motivated. They're willing to play to their strengths and ask for help. And they can take feedback objectively. They don't project those issues onto the other team and play like the blame throwing game or on customers or beating themselves up when they do get feedback that is less than pretty. And you'll also notice an improvement in performance KPIs. Complaints shift to compliments, and people can self-correct on the journey. So just want to summarize by saying that there's a lot of great resources. Make sure that you have those posted in your workplace. Even if you work alone, having the crisis text line 741-741. There's also a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and I can provide that as a follow-up email. You can get certification in mental health first aid, which is so needed anywhere you are, whether that's in the US, abroad, whatever organization you're in. You're gonna probably use mental health first aid far more than regular first aid, so just saying. But whether you need to address a mental health issue or pressure point in yourself, you wanna go from being a high achiever to a peak performer, or you just wanna better support the well-being of those in your workplace to improve your overall results, continuing that open conversation about these topics and access to those mental healthcare resources is absolutely key to creating stronger, healthier communities and organizations as we come out of this pandemic and beyond. So thank you so much, everybody, for your participation. And just want to give it up for our organizers again. You guys are great. Thank you so much for having me.
Amanda, we love having you here. Great job. Great job. Excellent. Everyone, thank you very much. We'll give you another program shortly coming up next month. Tracy and I will get another nice surprise going. So stay tuned till next month. Be safe and be well. Take care.
All right. Have a great day, everybody. And don't forget to join us for the AEC.